Hey guys, I'm
Jimmy.
Tim Kotzman here with RyQuant.
So, sorry.
We're gonna keep all this in, but just pretend like we're gonna do it again, right? That was the
just put
behind
it,
the yeah. There are no
just put it
bloopers.
on
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Hey guys, I'm Tim Kotzman here with RyQuant. Ryan McGinnis. Do you have other names? What are we supposed to call you?
I've been called a lot of things, a lot of bad things. I don't mind. You can call me whatever.
what what happened last week with this MicroStrategy earnings call? I feel like since that call happened, my brain's somewhere else and I'm waiting for it to come back to me. Like what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, geez, what a loaded question. I could talk about this for a while, but now I'm like out of view. It's fine. Let's just roll with it. The past month for me has been like it's been like one day. It just hasn't stopped. There's always a new wrinkle that's being added to the story from like a unique kid analyst perspective, let's call it. People just keep like adding in a wrinkle. So I've been like drinking out of a fire hose up until the earnings call. And then the night before the earnings call, I saw Saylor put out this almost like cryptic tweet about like the meaning of life, the universe. And I was like, wow, they've never done that before. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
so seeing that, I was already thinking like, wow, this is going to be something big. And then the event itself just crushed my expectations for what I was even thinking because that was the first time they've ever done anything like that where like Sailor's always talked about Bitcoin, you know what I mean, for the past 4 years. And I've been in the stock for 2 years now. So what is that? Like, let's call it eight, nine earnings calls that I've listened to live.
Mm-hmm.
And Sailor's really only talked about Bitcoin during that time. I think he's probably, and I'm guessing here, probably a little bit hands off on the software business. That's probably like fully delegated. That's probably fully dedicated to Long Fong, the president and CEO. But he's never done like a master class like overview of all things Bitcoin, MSTR, the financial engineering piece, of how they're kind of serving as like the financial engineers in between Bitcoin and the securities market and the debt market. That like I got one of the screenshots up here on my other screen about when he said this is the hottest stock in the universe. So it felt like a Super Bowl to me. Like it didn't just feel like, because I've listened to all the Tesla earnings calls of like the past 6, 7 years. Nothing was this cool with video, with charts, with data, like a total masterclass of data. And the thing I want to say there is it's not just Saylor. Of course, he's the quarterback. He's the top guy. We can talk about him till the cows come home, and we all end up doing that anyway. But there is a real team of winners involved in that roughly, let's call it 10-person treasury analyst team and the people who run the BI software business, which
Yeah.
I still love. You see the dog in the background.
Yeah. People are gonna
Sophie.
be distracted. They're gonna have to rewind the video because
Sophie.
they're gonna love the dog action.
Um, So yeah, it's not just Sailor. There is a team of like A plus players running the treasury team. We've got about 1,900 plus folks running the BI software business, which everyone seems to want to, discard that for whatever reason. I think it's a real treasure. I'd love to talk about that more, but the whole thing from this Super Bowl of like earnings call, like I'm still processing like the specifics, but the big picture was crazy.
One of the topics we want to cover today is Bitcoin extremism. I don't even know if I need to read off the rest of it. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, a lot of them. Number one, so Bitcoin is a cult, but I think that's a good thing, right? I've only invested in calls with like Bitcoin, Tesla, MicroStrategy. That's my game. I love it. So I'm not saying that at all in like a bad sense. And here's the other thing I'll say. I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, right? That's what I am. So I'm not going to be breaking down like Solana on-chain numbers or Ethereum this or anything else. So I feel like I'm like a part of that cult. But the differentiating factor between, let's say, like the Tesla cult and the Bitcoin cult is these people, the extremists, are so locked in on like all of the things that come with it, like destroy the Fed, we hate the banks, any security is a junk coin, anything, priced in dollars is a junk coin, which oddly enough, like Bitcoin is priced in dollars. So, but just let me talk about the word extremism at first, because we see this phenomena play out all across life, right? Like we still have Supreme Court justices who are there to like interpret the Constitution, let's say, because the range of interpretations can be so wide.
Mm-hmm.
We of course see this in religion. We see this in just other like big aspects of life. There's different ways of interpreting these things. And that like that's all fine and good that people want to have this super like extremism, like any stock is a junk coin, fiat's like going to zero tomorrow. People can like think those things if they want, and this was the point that I think Saylor touched on with his recent interview in DC, where the young woman flew to DC to be in person with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he said the whole, paranoid crypto anarchist. I'm in his camp with this, right? And by the way, I'm not just agreeing with everything Saylor says, like just for the sake of agreeing with them. If Saylor started buying Ethereum tomorrow, I'd be like, I'm out. But the reality of the world as I see it in my interpretation, right? Back to the different interpretations that we can have. The banks are not going to collapse tomorrow. They're so systemically like locked into the human condition, and we all learned that from 2008. They're not going to fail unless America was to fail or default, which would probably require being conquered in a military capacity. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it's not impossible, but I put that as like the smallest of smallest probabilistic outcomes. So with that being said, I'm still down to own Bitcoin on cold storage and, own equities, gamble a little bit in the options market. You see what I mean? But you got to look at this thing like holistically through the lens of like just the interpretations. And so many people within the Bitcoin community, especially like OGs and stuff like that, not everyone, but many of them, like they wrap the entirety of their lives into Bitcoin ethos, whether it be like they only eat beef, they only fry their French fries in tallow, they didn't get the vaccine, and they want to tell everybody all these things all the time because it all comes down to their like cult like belief in Bitcoin, which is a good thing. Again, I think cults are good. That's fine. But we should be more cognizant of like the totality. I'm thinking of like a distribution like bell curve. Like we should be more cognizant of like there's a lot of different interpretations here. No one of them is like 100% correct. They're all subjective, and we all just come at this from our different like lens.
Is that a new microphone? Did the GoFundMe actually come to pass, or tell us about that microphone? I don't. Tell me about the microphone.
No, it's one of those things like I like there's so many settings on this thing, and like I was talking to your buddy who's in the room, like a true audio engineer. There's so many different settings and plugins and all that stuff. I'm terrible with these kind of details. Like even on our True North calls, I'll ask the guys like 5 to 10 minutes prior, like, wait, where's the link? I'm always running late and I'm just so bad on these types of details. But no, this is the same microphone. I think I just have it angled right with the right settings.
Looks great. So yeah, I didn't know if it was something new that we needed to cover. For folks in the West, there is no conceivable reason to ever spend or sell Bitcoin. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the things that I just texted Tim as far as like topics for today. And look, this is my view.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to the bell curve of interpretations, right? Like some people want to just stack as much Bitcoin, and then when they reach a certain age or a certain net worth, they'll just start spending it and like run it out to zero.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do other things. What I'm planning on doing is like my Bitcoin, like my real Bitcoin is just never going to move. And the distinction there, when Tim said like for folks in the West, I don't mean like the West Coast. I mean like,
Yeah.
I mean like
The East
if you
Coast as well?
had from sea to shining sea.
Yeah.
But it's really not even people like living in America. It's like if you have access to Western banking rails, if you get paid in dollars, that's the group of people I'm talking about, right? Because we were talking about this recently about like I was making a case on a Twitter space for like how fiat as a medium of exchange works phenomenally well for me. And again, this is just one interpretation, but between Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, my money automatically goes into the bank and then it automatically pays my bills. Like I've automated all that stuff. I can send people $100, $1,000 on like Cash App, PayPal for whatever. That all works great for me. I hope to like keep using that system indefinitely. Now, other folks in other parts of the world, that might not be a reality for them. They might have like very corrupt governments. They might have very unstable banks who will like force you out of your money, right? And all of those things. And I'm curious to learn more about those use cases as I have been for the past like number of years. But for me, like this is what I'm saying. This is like the dominant asset, right? Like human history has never seen anything like it. So why would I use the, let's call it excess capital that I'm saving in Bitcoin? Why would I ever touch that if I also recognize that like the fiat banking system, and we can talk about how bad it is. We can do all that stuff, but it still works perfectly fine for all of my use cases. So that's my point there. It's like I would never sell my Bitcoin, and it almost puzzles me as to why anyone else would in the West.
Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by Stampseed. I would just recommend that you go right to stampseed.com and check it out for yourself. I've held it in my hand. It's a titanium seed phrase storage device. This thing is one solid piece of titanium. There are no loose pieces, and you can hammer your seed phrase in letter by letter. When you go to stampseed.com, use promo code TIM15 for a 15% discount on the entire website. That's TIM15. So with the banking system being serviceable for many people in the West, and there's still an exorbitant amount of unbanked people in the United States. It's staggering.
Right.
I don't have the stat in front of me. I invite and encourage people to go Google that. It's unbelievable and super unfortunate at a minimum. But with us having the banking system we have, what is going to wake up retail over the next couple of quarters? Is it going to be Bitcoin hitting six figures? Is it going to be something else? I mean,
That's a great question. And luckily we have the tools to track these things. You know what I mean? Like that Google search interest is such a phenomenally powerful tool to just measure the world total or even just America total. How many people are talking about this? How many people are searching for things like Coinbase.com or what have you? So what'll be the catalyst? I don't know. There might not ever be a catalyst. right? Because another one of the big ideas here is that like Twitter, especially Bitcoin Twitter, and even more so MicroStrategy Twitter, is a total echo chamber.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I talk about this stuff, you talk about this stuff, we talk about this stuff all the time, but then I go home to my friends or family and they think like Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, or like they don't even know who Michael Saylor is, or they don't even know what the Federal Reserve is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So you can have a prominent business person like Michael Saylor screaming this stuff from the rooftops, and I think there's just a big majority of people who like won't even ever get it. And that's the saying, I forget where I heard this, but you don't have to worry about people stealing your best ideas. You can scream them from the rooftops and most people will just ignore you. So yeah, I mean 100K will definitely be a big psychological barrier, or not barrier, but it'll just be like a breaking point, just in the same way that SPX 5000, like when the S&P hit 5,000, that was a big psychological hurdle. Same thing for 10,000 when that day comes, you know what I mean? So yeah, we'll just have to keep overlaying price and like volume and those types of things with the Google search interests, just for our purposes of knowing like where are we at in the cycle. But it's all unknown and we'll just have to figure it out as we get there.
So this statement is not meant to offend anyone, but does retail even matter? I mean, if the MicroStrategies of the world, of which there's only one of MSTR, but
Yeah.
as MSTR is included in these indexes and people are just living their lives, they're very busy, they have families, they have jobs, they have kids,
Yeah.
they have activities, and their retirement accounts are just going to be weighted into MicroStrategy. Like the DCAers, I mean, is it more about some of that aspect of it at this certain point? I mean, it, I threw around the word institutions a lot, but like BlackRock, it's not BlackRock buying, it's their clients buying. So, yeah, any thoughts there?
Yeah, and again, to your point, this message is not meant to offend anyone. And here's what I will say about the retail shareholder. None of this like narrative type stuff even matters. Here's the reality. What matters to you or anyone else as a man, as a woman, as a father, as a mother, what matters is your family and your close friends. That's what matters. So, like, allocating your capital and your resources and your time in such a way where you optimize for your people. So that's like the foundational piece there. And then as far as like price moving and stuff like that, and like people were asking me on a space the other day, they were like, "Oh, is Ryan gonna get out in time? Like, is he gonna sell his MicroStrategy shares at the top?" And then my question for them like always is like, when was the time to sell Apple Computer? When was the top? You know what I mean? So that's almost a side point to your question here, but yeah, I mean the things that are gonna move price from here on out are really like big money in term, especially for MicroStrategy. Bitcoin's already reached an escape velocity where like Saylor used to be able to like move the market. Elon Musk used to be able to move the market. I think those days are either behind us or like we're getting there just because of the size. Um, MicroStrategy, on the other hand, at 45, $50 billion in market cap, I think the driving force, again, just in terms of price alone, is going to be high net worth individuals, institutions, sovereign wealth funds. I mean, I always forget the two countries. I think it's like Finland and Sweden or something very like Eastern European. They own some MicroStrategy. And then you That's the base layer. On top of that, you're going to have passive flows. Correction, we already have passive flows in indexes like the All Country World Index, which is almost 100% is going to rebalance higher in a few weeks. And then if we get added into, NASDAQ 100, S&P 500, that's a lot of passive money that's going to be coming in on an ongoing basis. And then before we even get to the ongoing basis part, there's going to be a ton of front running. There's going to be a ton of people like me who are like number go up mercenaries in both the call options and like the stock itself, or maybe they'll put on like MSTU, or they're gonna want like extreme exposure to the number go up phenomenon. So I would say it's really like that whole picture there, just for the price part alone. But again, it's the family unit that matters. Like that's my main answer to the question.
I just this morning watched, because it just came out this morning, maybe at noon, the interview that British Hodl did with Ben Workman.
Yeah.
And something, I'm sure there were several things I wasn't aware of. One was, I believe, in the NASDAQ 100 inclusion, $530 million coming in. And British was like, oh, is that like coming in over like the first year? And Ben said, no, like that just comes in like one-time shot. And then it rebalances it on whatever interval that rebalances. So curious to your reaction on that, almost coupled with, if I'm thinking through this in a way that they're married, that Punter Jeff talks about like people are going to try to front run this, but then like you're front running it, but then you're like, there's no reason to sell. You're trying to front run MicroStrategy and the $42 billion worth of Bitcoin that they've said that they're going to purchase over the next 3 years. Wow. Like when more than just the 100 people that are listening to this are aware of it, or the less than 10 people that wear an orange tie in the world, when more people wear orange ties, I'll kick it over to you.
There's just so much going on here. You know what I mean? To your point about the what Ben was saying, I still have to watch that video, because here's the thing. There is so much content, and we've talked about this like a month or two ago. Like the escape velocity of content is so real, we can't even keep up. But that's a great problem to have. Now, to Ben's point about the like NASDAQ 100 all at one shot, that is my understanding as well. I could be wrong on this, Ben could be wrong on this, but that is my interpretation. Like that initial inclusion is like a hammer, like on the close that day of inclusion. And then here's where it gets crazy. You've got the front running of that, which comes after the front running of All Country World Index rebalance, which is just in like a number of weeks. And then we go into January with the historic options expiration date. And I think Jeff is 100% right on this. And again, he could be wrong. I could be wrong. Who knows? We'll find out. But the incentive to exercise those options, of which there are many, many that are deep in the money, if an investor or a group of investors was to think that that's the lowest price they'll ever be able to buy MicroStrategy again,
facts,
then it doesn't make sense to just use it as a trading instrument, because that's my background. I've never once exercised an option. I traded Tesla, I traded MicroStrategy, never once exercised them, because I was already in those stocks in such big size that it was like, well, I'm going to deal in the options market so that I can have like cash to either like take care of friends and family, mom, dad, or like buy a car, like whatever. And the key point there is like, I'll never have to sell the underlying, but I'm going to deal in the options market to like generate like cash. So, and I say that because Jeff really opened my eyes to the many things, but he really opened my eyes to the incentives here for January for why like I'm now of the belief that like a lot of people are going to want to exercise these things. So that's the next thing on the calendar, right? Then we've got FASB fair value announcement, which is expected to come Q1 2025, which is not going to be like the earnings call in February. It'll be like in April or May, closer to MicroStrategy World. And that week prior to that April or May earnings call, I'm going to be calling into Jim Cramer's show and just like pitching this thing, not even asking him a question, just pitching this thing, hitting on all the key points until he hangs up with me on the phone. You know what I mean? So we're going to do that. Then we have MicroStrategy World, which is going to bring a lot of people. Like I feel like we all work together because like we're on Twitter like for like a lot. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
now there's going to be yet another, just like there was every year. But I went to the one last year. I'm like going to the one this year. There's going to be like a big energy of people physically together, not just on Twitter. And then, you know, perhaps maybe a number of months after that, there will be the S&P 500 inclusion. And all of this stuff is happening while the macro backdrop looks phenomenal. We got interest rates going down, we got global M2 going up, and it's happening during the peak seasonality of both of Bitcoin, both in terms of the halving schedule, where you know the price top for each cycle tends to come, let's call it 15, 18 months after the halving, and the election cycle. The past three cycles have had their peak point about 1 year, almost like 52 weeks to the dot after the election, which we're filming this on Monday. The election's tomorrow on Tuesday. So 12 months after tomorrow. Again, I could be wrong on all these things that I'm saying. I'm just trying to paint the picture, but I couldn't paint if I just had a blank canvas, I couldn't paint a better picture than what I feel like we have in front of us.
I have a theory. I've told zero people this theory. You're going to be the first person to hear it. I guess Matt will hear it along with you. My theory is we're going to go through all of these MSTRmoon.com events that you just described, and MicroStrategy is going to be buying Bitcoin, and they can buy it in a dynamic fashion depending on market factors in a very disciplined, responsible way. My theory is that as we get into the end of Q2 2025, the beginning of Q3, as long as the markets can handle it, MicroStrategy is just going to press on the gas and start buying Bitcoin. And basically, the people that are going to be selling at $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, $250,000, they'll be like, oh man, this is awesome. All right, yep, this cycle's done. And then the price is just going to keep going up and to the right. And MicroStrategy and BlackRock and Fidelity and Bitwise and Cathie Wood and all these cast of characters are just going to like press it. Any thoughts there?
A lot of thoughts. I'm with you on the theory too. The main thing I want to say is that, you know, that's what the treasury team does at MicroStrategy. I would imagine, I'm completely making this up, but I would imagine they have like custom Excel programs where they just put in all of their input data, right? Like what are interest rates at right now? What's the price of Bitcoin? How much room do we have in what I call the budget? Like what's their, you know, annualized interest expense? Because you're right, we can either sell convertible bonds or sell shares at the money. And the reason I say that is I was on a space the other day and someone was saying like, well, what do you think would happen if, price runs away? Do you think like Sailor and company are going to like sell more shares, or do you think they're going to do this, or do you think they're going to do that? What I responded to them was what I just said to you. They're running these numbers in that custom program and just pressing enter probably every 5 minutes. So we don't have to think like, oh, what if this happens in the future? Do we think they would like sell shares because of that event? No, they're ahead of all of us just running this program. And to your point, I think they're going to keep their foot on the gas and press it as hard as they can for the foreseeable future. And that's like the reflexivity that we were talking about on our first podcast and on like other speaking arrangements that I've had with people. Like there's just a monster reflexivity between the MSTR stock price and then what that allows them to do in terms of buying more Bitcoin. And then so I'm with you 100% on the theory, clearly. The other just quick story that I'll say here is Josh Brown, downtown Josh Brown, the compound. I've listened to him for years. I think he's really like the sharpest of like the regular guests on like CNBC, and like the sharpest of the much broader like TradFi like media establishment. He was saying years ago, I think it was even before COVID, he was saying like he got up like real close, like looked into the camera, and he was like, if you're selling Apple computer here, think about who you'd be selling it to. You're either, and then he listed three options. He was like, you're most likely either selling the stock to the company itself for their buybacks, you're selling it to an index fund or the myriad of ETFs that like mirror the NASDAQ 100, let's say, or there's a ton of these. Like there's the top 50 stocks in the world. Like Apple's like the biggest one in that. So you're selling your shares to the company, to the index fund complex, or you're selling it to Warren Buffett at Berkshire. And this was again before COVID. This was before they were, selling shares or anything like that. So I think that's the point here. It was like in your question there somewhere where like, oh, people might get excited because they bought Bitcoin at like 50,000 a coin. Now it's 100,000. They feel like a genius and they're going to go like sell it and cash out. And it's like, think about who the buyers are. Like just think for 1 second about who the buyers are. I think you said it so well in saying that BlackRock's not buying this Bitcoin. BlackRock doesn't own anything. They have 10 trillion in assets and they're like $180 billion market cap company. They don't own any of this stuff. They're just a custodian. But the people who want Bitcoin exposure will be buying it. So we can just simplify and say BlackRock is a buyer behind you. You've got nation states like Nayib Bukele and forgive me, I'm probably going to butcher her last name, but Maya Prabhu of Suriname. If she gets elected, day one, she's buying Bitcoin. We've got Senator Cynthia Lummis pushing like we want to get 5% of the entire Bitcoin supply over the next 20 years. And if the orange man like real estate guy wins and Bobby Kennedy, who also feels the same way that Senator Loomis does, if they get in and they bring in I won't even say the name, but if they get in and they, start buying Bitcoin, look out. And then we've got, of course, Sailor and company saying we're buying 42 billion over the next 3 years. So that's just a really like kind of like meta, like you can sell this thing. And my whole big pitch is like, I'm never giving financial advice. I just want to give and take with ideas. So people can do whatever they want. But I think we should probably be pretty cognizant of who's on the other side of the trade, who's buying it from you. And it's like that sailor quote of if you're going to invest and you're going to buy things for the long term, here's what you do. You think about what is an asset that someone smarter than you and richer than you is going to want to buy from you. That's like the big concept there. And they're not going to want to buy someone's like SPY, like S&P 500 index. They could have done that 20 years ago. They're not going to want to buy someone's treasury bonds or someone's, apartment like real estate. Like they're just not going to want to buy that. But if someone has, Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, these types of assets, I think people way richer than me and way smarter than me are going to want to own them in the deep future.
You want to talk a little bit about Hal Finney and how if you want to change the world, write code?
Yeah, powerful stuff. I mean, I tell this to some of my buddies or young people or like their kids, because I'm like one of the only guys in my family and like broader like family friend network, if we want to call it that, who was in the army. And so people say like, should I join? Like, I want to serve. I want to give back to the country. All of those good patriotic questions. And I tell them no. I say, go to Princeton, study computer science, and then write code. You want to serve, you want to change the world, you want to give back. And I mean it's just so fitting. It's so fitting that Hal said that. You know what I mean? Given
Mm-hmm.
his history as like an early cryptographer and a hardcore computer scientist. I think he actually said that quote in the year I was born in 1992, if my memory serves me correctly. It's like that picture of him, like the old computer, and I think his like wife behind him, the old computer. So yeah, I mean, if you want to change the world, don't waste your time with serving in the military because you or me carrying a gun in the woods in Fort Hood, Texas, doesn't change the world. You know what I mean? You do something like Bitcoin or even not even Bitcoin. If you're the lead engineer at Apple writing the iOS software, you have fundamentally changed the world, and we can debate if it was for the better or not, but like you provided the most robust like software to the world. And to me, that is service in the exact way that firefighters, hospice nurses, the guys who are putting roofs on people's houses in July, like that is service. And if you really want to be of service, write code.
Gresham's law.
Yeah, I think I forget what I was even texting you. Oh yeah, now I remember why I texted you that one. There's been like an ongoing discussion, and I find it to be very interesting about whether or not Gresham's law is applicable to Bitcoin. I think it is. Well, maybe let's pause here. And I'll just say what my I don't I forget like the if people Google the Wikipedia, it'll be the first thing that comes up. But my interpretation of Gresham's law is simply that the hardest money will disappear from circulation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of goes back to like what I said about, folks in the West to the extent that they want to be a Bitcoiner, I don't ever see a reason to sell it. That's like the harder money simply disappears from circulation, meaning people aren't actively like transacting in it and like moving it around. And I think there's a very compelling case. Maybe after this call, I'll get TradingView up and going and I'll just put out a short post on this. But if you look at Bitcoin over the past 5 years or even longer, right? But let's just use the past five for right now. Price obviously went up like 700% roughly. And the vol let me try and get this right. And the volume is going down like this, which is so incredibly rare. And here's also the caveat with this. Data could also always be like wrong, but I think this is right and legit. So you've got volume going like this, while over top of that, price is, going like this. And that's such a rare phenomenon in finance because like you look at Tesla when it exploded higher, massive volume. You even look at MicroStrategy when it did its first like big uncorrelated jump higher, massive volume, the most volume in the whole 30-year, 25, 30-year history of the company, massive volume. That's the normal phenomena. Nvidia, there'll be massive volume on those like jumps and gaps higher. But with Bitcoin, volume's going down and price is going up. I think I think Bitcoin is literally disappearing from circulation. Hence why I think that Gresham's law is applicable to Bitcoin.
How do you think about the value of MicroStrategy's BI software business?
Oh, the software business. I love this thing. I love the software business. And when I first started buying the stock, the software business was free
Mm-hmm.
because MicroStrategy was trading like 10 or 20 or let's say 10 or 20% below its Bitcoin holdings in after FTX blew up and for like 2 or 3 months it was trading below its Bitcoin. So I was like, at first I was just there for like, oh, Bitcoin exposure. The thesis has of course been refined and sharpened, but I was like, oh, Bitcoin exposure, and I can leverage this because I can't lever my cold storage Bitcoin, but I can lever this and buy more MicroStrategy. I was like, this is great. And the software business is free.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I think the software business is just such a treasure. And here's why. Because the numbers, the business fundamentals, yeah, it's not Google. Is that fair to say? It's not, growing revenues at 20% a year. It's not kicking off so much free cash flow that the Googles and Apples of the world have a real problem. This is when Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, but when Steve Jobs was still with us towards the end of his life, he flew to Omaha, Nebraska to meet with who else? Warren Buffett. And he was like, hey, man, I got so much cash. What should I do? And Buffett goes, do you think your shares are undervalued? And Steve always thought the stock was undervalued. So he's like, yeah, but Steve Jobs didn't want to do buybacks. And that's just kind of like a side story there. But yeah, these Apple, Google type software driven businesses, they're now at like the stage they have a problem with too much cash. So they're buying it back. That's not MicroStrategy, right? That's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
And if that was MicroStrategy, they either A, would have never bought Bitcoin. Also, COVID played a big, big factor in that for Saylor specifically, because he was worried he was going to have to sell the company and it was just going to get crushed and crushed and crushed. So if the software business was Google, A, we might have never been in this position. We might not be on this podcast right now. And the other thing is that if it did look like Google and they bought Bitcoin, the stock price would be 10, 20, 30 times higher than where it is now. But what I loved was that so many people left this thing for dead. They just discarded it and they were wrong in discarding it because here's my interpretation of the software business. Saylor on that podcast with I believe this young woman's name is Maddie. I should know this. The young lady who flew to DC. He said we have thousands of customers. And I've been trying to find the total customer list through ChatGPT and all the other sources, and it's kind of like kept in house. But now we know the total customer number. It's thousands. The thing that I do know with certainty is that the software business has like every type of customer imaginable. It has small businesses, private businesses, large public companies like Microsoft. They have governments like American DoD like uses like MicroStrategy 1 or one of those products. Churches, nonprofits, universities. The reason I'm stressing this is to say that like this software business is so well entrenched globally. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the nature of a lot of these like subscription services or contracts of some form just adds to that component of like it's well entrenched, meaning as long as this thing doesn't die, which I don't see any reason that like it would. Again, it's not Google, but I'm not writing this thing off. As long as it can just keep doing what it's doing, that's great enough because that'll provide us like the necessary credit rating, which we already have. I forget that double B, triple B, something like that, but it's good enough to accomplish the following end state: borrow billions of dollars for 50 basis points, 60 basis points, 100 basis points, and then buy as much Bitcoin as possible, right? Like that's the key takeaway. It's good enough to the point that it's great to me. And as long as it can just keep chugging along and just allowing the MicroStrategy HQ to keep doing what they're doing, then it's phenomenal. And it's also phenomenal because nobody understands that. Nobody took the time to think deeply about, sure, the business fundamental numbers like aren't great, but let's think about this. How well entrenched is it? Is it going anywhere? Let's talk to some of the software engineers. Let's get their feedback about like how healthy the business is directly. And then this just takes me back to the sailor quotes of, you know, the things that you want to invest in, there's three pieces. Nobody understands it, everybody needs it, and nobody can stop it. And that first one of like nobody understands it, that's also the sailor quote of let them take 10 years to figure it out because that's how you 100x. And I think that's just so true.
Any closing thoughts?
Dude, I'm pumped up now, man. Let's go. This is fun.
We might need to incorporate the dog into the next episode. I think the crowd's going to really ask for that as we move forward.
I know. I tried to get her here, but usually I'm telling her like, like leave me alone. She'll come like sit right here and like cry and just like get me to go out on the balcony and we'll throw the toys around. So she probably thought I was coming in. But yeah, we'll get her over here.
All right. Any thoughts on MSTR True North and the reaction that maybe you've received on that platform?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's crazy. It's just like everything else in life is so crazy. Everyone trying to like hit me up, get on the phone with me, do podcasts, and it's not just me. It's you're involved. It's everyone out, Ben, Jeff, the whole crew. Everyone's trying to talk to us. So it's crazy. My closing thoughts would just simply be let them take 10 years to figure it out because that's how you 100x.
Thanks for the time today, Ryan. We'll do this again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Tim.